Good morning from the UK, and welcome to the Portsmouth session of SECREV. We've got some fabulous speakers lined up for you over the next couple of hours from the Cybercrime and Cybersecurity Research Group and from the wider university community as well. And I'll just provide a very quick overview if I can get to my slides up to share my screen, wherever my slides have gone to. Right, so everybody should be able to see my slides now. Fantastic. Yeah, so welcome to SECREV2025, and so for our first talk today is from one of our doctoral students, Jo Ashcroft, whose talk is Sticks and Stones, using AI to identify online transphobic hate. And this will be followed by AI and decision support machines from another of our students, Martin Lynch. And then we'll be looking at the human element in cyber strategies, an actor-centered review of cyber deterrence and cyber persistence theory from Alice Brett, before moving over to US cyber diplomacy, a transformative moment from Dr. Dafydd Townley. And the next up after that would be Samuel de Cruz with de-biasing aid PCAR for users managing office emails. And finally, my colleague Dr. Annie Kirby will be finishing off our session with the concept of reflective fortification in cybercrime awareness education. So, without much further ado, I will stop sharing my slides and hand over to Jo.
Okie dokie, thank you. I will share mine.
I shall.
Is that coming through okay?
Yeah, that is absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Jo. And yeah, for those of us who aren't speaking, if you feel free to mute and turn off your video cameras as well, if you would like to.
Okay, thank you. So good morning. My name is Jo Ashcroft, and today I'm presenting my paper, Sticks and Stones, using AI to identify online transphobic hate. For those of you that may not be familiar with the very old adage, it refers to sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Something that I think we all know now to be entirely untrue. And there we go. So first, I'm just going to throw this out there is a question. What does online hate look like? I think we all can identify easy things like name calling and insults and stuff like that. And we generally know hate when we see it. But actually defining it is somewhat tricky. And that's what I've been trying to do here. And that's online hate specifically towards the transgender community that I'm exploring in this particular study. So firstly, just a quick run through of the contents. I've got a couple of definitions. I want to just mention some of the impacts of online hate, again, towards the transgender community. I'll then run through my methods. Don't worry, it's at a very high level because there's a lot of AI and stuff in there. And just talk about the data that I've used. And then I'll show you a top level of the themes that have emerged from this study and a snapshot of the topic model, and then the types of groups that are actually demonstrating this hate, who are actually posting this hate content. And then I'll quickly touch upon the future studies in this series. So firstly, a couple of definitions. Online hate is a form of hate speech. It refers to text, audio, or visual content posted online. It is abusive, discriminatory, or harassing. and is motivated by prejudice toward a personal group due to their race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, or transgender identity. And as you can tell from that, it covers a lot of things, and hate can mean different things to different people. Transgender is describes those people whose gender identity, gender expression, or behavior does not conform to the sex that they were assigned at birth. So the impacts, as well as dealing with the usual insults, name calling, the massive amount of misinformation and disinformation, transgender people can experience doxing, i.e. where their social media profiles, their private information such as addresses, places of work, phone numbers, etc. get leaked online. They may have personal photos leaked, and the people who do this are particularly fond of pre-transition or even mid-transition and pictures of scars and things like that. They also are subject to unfounded accusations of very serious crimes such as rape and paedophilia. And some of these accusations go to reinforce the beliefs that, in particular, trans women are a danger to women within women's spaces and around children. And finally, all this is pretty inescapable. And that's one of the things that I think sometimes we overlook. It's very easy to say to people, oh, you just need to turn your phone off. But we all know it's not that easy. We live through our phones. And even if you do turn a phone off, you kind of know that stuff's still happening, especially if you've been victimized in recent times. So you know that people are still posting hate out there. And all of this is towards an extremely vulnerable population. And as a result, the transgender community, we see high rates of depression, anxiety, eating disorders, self-harm, psychosis, and PTSD, and a horrifyingly high rate of suicide, all of which reinforces why this is an important area to look at. So onto the study itself. You'll see at the top, the main technologies that were used here were Python and its many sub-packages. And I used, or I'm using this on a Google Colab instance. Google Colab is provided by Google. It's using spare capacity on the Google Cloud platform. And is available through the YouTube, and it basically just gives you a lot more capacity than you would get on a standard laptop or anywhere else. I've also used YouTube APIs, which means I have access to the data direct, so there's no screen scraping or anything like that. The data for this study it consists of 50,000 YouTube comments, which were posted against transgender-themed videos. And although that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, it actually equates to only about 1% of the total comments available from the videos that I picked up. Once the data was collected and cleaned and all that good stuff, I used it to build a large language model using one of the small BERT models available, which was a whole learning curve in itself. And following this, I undertook topic modeling using NLTK and BERT topic. NLTK is one of the most widely used natural language processing tools out there. And I've certainly used it in the past, although not previously with LLMs. And it produced some astonishing results. The results of the topic modeling then went into a clustering process to actually sort of surface the topics. And this is where I somewhat broke the process, as I wanted to surface as much detail as possible. Normally, when you're clustering, you would ask for maybe 20 or even up to 50 topics. But because I wanted detail of the language, I actually forced it to produce 300 topics, which is not normal in this type of process. In order to get this to this point, there was a massive amount of testing. I used a number of models. There was a lot of fine tuning. I used a lot of more traditional techniques to sort of triangulate the results so that I knew what I was looking at represented the truth of the data within there. And I then went through a process of renaming the topics, because the topic naming automatically can be a bit weird, and then categorizing it. And I categorized it across a 5-tier hierarchy. So looking at the type of data that I picked up, so I identified and picked up 767 videos, which belong to 349 unique channels. And as I said, that's where I got my 50,000 comments for this particular study. The distribution on this tiny little map, you can see the majority of it, the majority of the videos come from the US, the UK. There's a smattering from India, Australia, and Canada. And looking at the comments themselves, the distribution is pretty similar. So on to the high-level themes. You can see here there's things like general abuse, and this is what I think we would traditionally think of as name calling. We see debate about the nature of gender. We have a very large section here called transgender people, which actually breaks down into trans women, trans men, trans children, and the transitioning process itself. We see views about the state of society. We have talk about transphobia itself. There's a massive area around sports, which I actually tried to break down a bit further, but it's fairly obvious what's in there. We have conspiracy theories. We have religion. We also have discussion about words and terminology, and that's very much around the use of pronouns and cis women and those sort of things, which a lot of people object to. So I haven't shown you the full model here because it's quite big, but this is a little snapshot that you can see here. And you can see under transgender people, we can see topics like paedophilia coming up, rape, trans people should die. We have a subsection around children, and things like no such thing as a trans kid. We also see bullying, which when I first saw this, I thought it was an anti-bullying topic, but actually what it was expressing was the view that children weren't bullied enough, and this was what was causing them to become trans or to be gay, and that we should just be bullying our children more. We also see some of the conspiracy theories coming in here. So causes of transgenderism, things like propaganda, it was COVID vaccine. There's talks about agendas, cults, and things like that. So there's a lot within this model. Is there anything else in there? No. So onto the types of groups that kind of emerged from all this. So what we see a predominance of in terms of the hate is there's a lot of far right. We see a lot of religious right. There's a lot of religious rhetoric in there, and that's primarily sort of Protestant Christian right. We also see rhetoric from TERFs. TERFs are trans exclusionary radical feminist. And this started from a place of sort of trying to protect women's rights and spaces, but then extended to into the rhetoric that trans women are a danger to women and children, which is very much far right in its nature, even though TERFs generally wouldn't self-identify as far right. We have pseudoscientists, and they're often reposting mis or disinformation. They love a good weird percentage that comes from somewhere. They're also very fond of things like or the misconception of scientific theory as being just a theory. We do have a lot of neutral and confused and people just questioning, trying to make up their own mind. But of course, on the internet, you have to have an opinion. You can't be neutral. You have to come down on one side or another. So these people tend to get bullied. We do have a lot of allies. I think sometimes they get a bit lost in the mix. But generally, allies are relatively silent online. And then it goes all the way around to our parasocial and fetishists, which, to be honest, tend to comment against the more sexualized videos. And also, you know, what they post is not generally hateful, but it can be very distasteful. In terms of future research, I'm currently in the process of writing this study up. There's a tiny bit of analysis still to do. The methodology has turned out to be extremely complex, and so that's been spun off into its own paper. In regard to the future studies, next I'm going to be analysing how YouTube is actually used to spread transgender hate and disinformation, more detail on the groups, things like monetization, links to external websites, how it wraps into wider far-right views in terms of racism and things like that. The second is looking at the views of transgender content creators and how this type of rhetoric actually impacts their lives. And thirdly, probably the largest study is looking at the change in hate and disinformation over time, how it's evolved. And this has got a substantial backlog of comments stretching back 10 years. I was originally going to stop it at the end of 2024, but the particular political situation has changed, and I'm still collecting comments going forward. And that's my research in a nutshell. Thank you very much for listening. And that's me.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Jo. It's definitely a pleasure supervising this very important piece of work as part of your supervision team. Okay. All right, moving on to our next speaker now, who is another of my students, Martin, who's going to be giving us a discussion around AI and decision support. This is an update on his work from last year, so it's amazing to have you back with us at SECREV, Martin. Happy to hand over to you now, if you want to share your slides.
There we go. Can we see that?
I can, yes, Martin.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you everybody for coming. It's been a long year, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the updates for if anybody was lucky enough to be on 12 months ago. My name's Martin Lynch, and I'm a third year researcher at the University of Portsmouth. My particular field of study is in the security and operational security environment of physical security. And what that means is I've been researching for these last few years now how human beings interact with the prompts and commands that they see displayed when we're using an artificially intelligent or what Professor Vincent Block in Holland likes to term, and I agree with him to some extent, it's AI and decision support machines. So that's where my research sits, and where I sit inside it. So right, so I've got a bit of a technical glitch. It's not working off the clicker. So how do we understand, and how do we look at artificial intelligence as a decision support mechanism? And the next slide, or the next two slides, I think is a really good way of me to demonstrate to you exactly what people who use artificial intelligence inside decision support machines can see, and how they can visualize and use a cognitive process to understand what they're being told. And quite often it's under duress. The situations inside CCTV rooms and places like that can be very stressful. Things are happening with alacrity. Things happen without any pre-warning, and they moves really quickly. So I'm going to show you a traditional CCTV suite, which looks like this. So you can see there pretty much that there are some 50, if you care to count them, but I've counted them for us. You can see 55 different types of feed. So if you were to count all the cameras inside each screen and then add up the other computers that are displaying information of various sorts, and this extra information can be displayed from LLMs. So it's very confusing. It's very fast paced, and it's very dynamic. If you look at the top left hand side of the screen and try to understand that the sort of 3-inch by 3-inch displays and a live monitor, you can see how complex and time consuming it is for a human being to look at this. And there is some crossover into the cyber environment, and certainly crossover for a pedagogy moving forward for even widespread applications of perhaps the military, to understand how we make decisions, which I'll move on to later, how we can make a really complex cognitive task analysis when faced with this type of equipment. So the next slide is what you will see if you're using an AI-enabled support system. So the one you're currently looking at is what we know today, and that is where we're moving forward to in tomorrow. And if we look at Oliver Philippou, who writes extensively about the future use of technology in physical security, he's estimated that by 2026, when the curve hits, 75% of everything that we purchase globally to do with physical security will have an element of this type of mechanism inside it. So what we can see here, as opposed to that, it's almost the same system by way of how many cameras it can look at. And using this particular type of system displays varying degrees of activity with different colors. So you can see on the screen, and I'll move on to colors shortly, you can see on the screen some grays, some blues, some yellows, and some reds. So that acts pretty much like the traditional RAG rating. You can have a benign, nothing happening gray, through to a blue, which is some movement under the normal parameters, through to yellow, which is a kind of warning sign where something might be happening, but the the pattern seeking part of the AI doesn't quite understand what it is, and then red, which would suggest that we have to have some form of human interaction or human oversight of the system. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the diagnostics. So the AI will produce a smaller screen, which you can't read it, I'm sure, but that smaller screen displays the area and alphanumeric code of what it thinks is transpiring in that particular field of vision, and then a probability of whether that person or whether that thing is a human or whatever it's looking at. It'll produce a probability to say this is what we think, which is this sort of displayed so you can have a better overview of it on this particular slide. So inside of the research, and I'm aware I've only sort of got 15 minutes, and as you're all academics, it could go on for quite some time. That the probability factor is something that is proving difficult for people to understand. I've listed it there as number 4, complexity. So you can see immediately on the slide that I'm displaying that those human beings to a human are human 100%, whereas here we've got person displayed at 0.993, 0.9, 0.91. We know completely straight away without hesitation that those people are people, whereas our decision support system isn't 100% sure. We can redress this inside the system by supervised machine learning. So there is a facility inside the machines that I deal with, and they're pretty much the same across the whole marketplace. You can go inside and there's a series of settings and tell it, say, no, this is 100% a person. And with so many iterations of the supervised learning, it will learn to recategorize as and when it can. It's particularly unhappy when ducks walk through the area, which I find terribly amusing. So in moving on to discuss this further, what some of the issues that I've raised and currently been looking at through a phenomenographic approach, which delivers outcome spaces, and these are the ones that I particularly wanted to talk about, heuristics. So all of these lead really to the ability to be able to understand decision making. So what I'd like you to do is just a thought experiment. Imagine you're looking at the screen. Imagine something's going on, and the artificial intelligence is painting a picture for you. And how do you actually think about the display? If you're a very experienced person, and some of this comes from Gary Klein's work in naturalistic decision making and cognitive task analysis. If you're very experienced, you may see something different to me, who might be very inexperienced, and heuristics, we might use Gary Klein's terminology of the rule of thumb or tacit knowledge. So understanding this is something that is important to my future work, because this might negate some of the need to have very experienced people all the time, which I think we can't have. We must have inexperienced people coming through at the bottom, perhaps being supervised. And one of the things that I'm not sure about using the word emerged, but one of the things that is apparent at this stage of my research is the educational standard of people that I deal with. And it's not meant to be disparaging, but or to generalize, but a lot of people didn't get any further than what I would categorised as secondary education. So that's pretty much in the UK leaving education at about 16 years of age. And so the inexperience and a slight lack of education does lead us down a different path, which is somewhere I'm looking in the future to understand better. Trust. That came as a big surprise, that within a matter of a few short months even, that the operators of using the system that we've just seen, and I'll go back to show you that particular kind of dynamic computer display. So within a couple of short months, all of the operators of this type of machine, trusted the machine implicitly. No second guessing. They didn't think that there was anything untoward in any of the displays, and that was really across the board. Even though, as I mentioned earlier, that less experienced people, not less knowledgeable, less experienced people didn't sometimes have the same outcome space as those with more experienced in the Klein NDM model. Anthropomorphism became apparent very quickly with again a very short space of time. The operators of the system, and the age gap, the age range is considerable, from sort of 21 to 60, embodied human characteristics to the machine. And I think it gave two things. It lent a sort of camaraderie. They teamed up very well, and I was not taken aback, but I was surprised by how the members of the operators that I get to speak to had accepted the machine into their cadre. And I think that's something that maybe we would be able to think about future. Certainly those of you who deal with the military might be able to think about how this might play out. And moving on to complexity. So complexity reflects back on what I said about the education piece, the pedagogical piece that needs further work. But it is interesting how very quickly the operators understand, but don't have an intrinsic understanding of black box or white box syndrome. And my work is pressing into those areas of, I think I use the word technophobia, and my supervisor helped me understand it maybe in a better frame as a neo-Luddite. So the phenomena, I think I'm probably going to go over a couple of minutes, if that's all right. Yeah, a very important part of the work originally was discussed by Vincent Blocks, who you can read his data. It's very fascinating how he understands machines as decision support enabled. It's a qualitative phenomenographic approach. We have limitations. For me, where access to this type of environment proved difficult. Participants who'd used both systems proved difficult, leading to a small sample size. Operator bias existing as both technophobe and technophilic. And my own unfamiliarity with phenomenography. I think the last part, this came out of last year's work and was part of my talk last year about the production or the pilot study produced some interesting findings when, and this is across the board from operators in security to cyber people to the military, and it proved apparent that color deficiency dyslexia, and dyscalculia all played a part in being able to look at and analyze data which is output from AI enabled decision support machines. Thank you. 15 minutes and 10 seconds.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Martin. It's great to hear an update of your very important research exploring this area. Yeah, if you're okay, I was about to say if you're okay to stop sharing screen. I know you have to shoot off shortly as well for other meetings. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to present to us today.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Alice. If that's okay, Alice, who'll be talking to us today about the human element in cyber strategies and actor-centered review of cyber deterrence and cyber persistence theory. You okay? Yep, you can see your screen absolutely fine now.
Perfect, brilliant, thank you. So yeah, my name is Alice Brett, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Portsmouth. And today I will talk through what is cyber deterrence and cyber persistence theories, why did I want to look at them, what I did, what I found, so what, and what's next. So to start off with, what is deterrence and persistence? So deterrence is influencing an actor's cost-benefit analysis. You're trying to deter unwanted action by making the costs either too high or the benefits of performing an action too low. So I see it like a castle. It's about projecting a message to prevent behavior. So that castle looks like it will take too much effort to overthrow. I'm just going to go down to the pub instead. Persistence, on the other hand, is about seizing the initiative. It's about taking proactive action. It thinks of cyberspace as an environment of exploitation rather than coercion. So whoever is better at taking the advantage wins. It's a bit like chess, trying to get an advantage on the opponent by thinking a few moves ahead. So why do I want to look at this? The UK cyber strategy is heavily influenced by deterrence and persistence. So on the slide, there's some quotes from the current national cyber strategy. The National Cyber Force, whilst not mentioning persistence in name, describes basically what persistence is. So essentially, the UK's actions to mitigate the cyber threat to the UK are being based on these approaches. However, as the UK strategy itself notes, the current approach to deterrence is just not working. So I want to know why. Is it the whole thing? Is it just aspects of it? Is it not working for specific actors? However, most work done on the cyber deterrence and persistence look at the big picture, how to implement the theories, would they work in cyberspace for this or that specific situation, and a kind of a broad, do they work in general? But I want to look at how they work at the human level, kind of how do they work on actors, because actors are not a homogenous group. They're different with different goals, different skills, different techniques. So I want to understand what are the factors that impact those actors, and eventually kind of in further pieces of work to determine if they work for all the different actors. So yeah, the how. So my approach. As this is the first piece of a wider study, I undertook a rapid review of peer-reviewed journals since 2020 to understand the current thinking of cyber deterrence and cyber persistence theories. After filtering, I reviewed 30 articles. Most were on deterrence, with just shy of a third covering persistence, which is expected because the seminal book of persistence was only published in 2022. So what did I find? So there are 5 factors that influenced actors. Attribution, so knowing who the actor is, who are you trying to deter, or who are you targeting for persistence. Communication, so the ability to send messages to the actor, the deterrent message for deterrence, and for persistence, the actual action itself is the message. So it's a kind of a form of tacit bargaining. Costs, the cost to overcome defenses, the cost of retaliation or punishment, or the accumulative cost of persistent action. And then for deterrence, credibility, so how much the actor believes the deterrent messaging, And for persistence, there's interconnection. So persistence theory itself states that interconnectiveness and constant contact are a structural feature of cyberspace. So you can't really be persistent if you aren't in constant contact. As a kind of general note to deterrence and persistence, they're not clearly defined in the literature. There was a lot of overlap or slightly different definitions. So for this and the rest of my findings, I've used the most common approaches to deterrence and persistence. So from those 5 factors, I identified 7 traits of actors that impact them. So these are motives, what is the goal or ambition of the actor, technical skills, the location of the actor, what is the actor's perception of the UK, what is the actor's personal connections, what is the actor's social status, and then the actor's culture, so their beliefs, values, customs. A lot of these traits are interconnected, so the culture might be tied to social status or location, but they are distinct enough to be separate traits. So breaking down these factors, I've put some questions that could be asked about each actor for each of the factors, but I won't talk through all the questions or give examples for each of the traits, but for each factor I'll highlight a few and give kind of some examples. So attribution, that's knowing who the actor is impacted by the actor's motives and technical skills. So for example, does the actor claim responsibility? And how technically proficient are they? If both theories require attribution for it to work, then an actor who claims responsibility, so for example, a hacktivist, would be easier to apply actions against than someone technically proficient who is wanting to, say, steal intellectual property and therefore remains hidden. Communication is impacted by location, perception of the UK and culture. So, for example, if an actor views the UK as antagonistic, they may interpret a message as an escalation rather than simply a message to stop attacking as it was intended to be. Costs. So this was impacted by most traits of the actors. So a lot of these factors feed into impacting the cost. So culture, motives, location, personal connections, technical skills, and social status. So, for example, a state actor might have a lot of resource available to them, but they also have a lot of civilian infrastructure to defend against any retaliatory action. Or, on the other hand, a solo terrorist might be strongly ideologically motivated and have very little that they're afraid to risk in an attack. Credibility. So, again, this applies to deterrence only. As deterrence relies on the actor believing the threat to prevent the action from occurring. So this was impacted by location, perception of the UK, and personal connections. So, for example, a Chinese criminal might not view the UK's threat of a prison sentence as credible, as there's no extradition treaty to the UK for China. Or someone may view the UK's policing skills as not skilled enough to be able to trace an attack back to them. Or with personal connections, a criminal using ransomware might believe a threat is more credible if they know people who have been caught or punished, such as seeing another ransomware affiliate that they work with be caught. And then persistence only for interconnection. I could only identify one trait, which was location. This is a little more theoretical. In examples, so in theory, countries such as Russia can switch off their connection to the wider internet and switch to their internal RUNet. So if an actor turns off the connections, could it impact persistence at all? Or if a state actor bases themselves outside of their country and their country has limited connection, the targets for persistent action are limited to just the assets being used to undertake the attacks. Is that enough? It's a bit theoretical at the moment. So in conclusion, or so what, as I like to say, understanding what actor traits impact different aspects of deterrence and persistence means that we can evaluate the effectiveness of the different mechanisms of the theories to determine what works for specific actors. For example, it appears that deterrence requires a large cost to be factored into the actor's cost-benefit analysis for deterrence to work, whereas persistence seemed to be dependent on the resilience of the actor. So this may mean that actors with little to lose would not respond well to deterrence, but persistence might work better against them. Also, not many traits seem to impact persistence, which may mean it might work better across a broader range of actors. And location impacts multiple factors, which may mean more tailored approach is required for different geographical locations. So what next? So now that I've identified these traits, I plan to use these against case studies of actors that have attacked the UK. And I want to see where the UK has applied these actions or applied actions against the actors, and if there's specific traits in common with what have worked. And then kind of eventually work backwards again to build up to see if deterrence or persistence works best with specific traits or actors, or what specific combination or factors or mechanisms seem to work best. So yeah, that just leaves me to say thank you for listening, and there's my contact details.
Happy if I unmuted myself. That's absolutely fantastic, Alice. Great to see the results of your first study with the rapid review being presented here today. And I think that brings us on quite nicely towards my colleague Dafydd's talk as well, who's obviously pretty good at cyber diplomacy. And so I shall hand over to Dafydd now.
Thank you, Iain. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you should all be able to see that now. Okay. I'm a historian by academic training, so this is my first foray into anything remotely associated with cyber, and this is the basis for an article that I'm currently trying to finish. I say that because as you go through the as we go through the slides and the content, you'll find that this is a rapidly changing situation. This was a completely different article, as I mentioned to Iain earlier, 6 months ago, and this has been something of a learning curve for me in terms of writing about contemporary issues from somebody who's traditionally written about things about dead people whose opinions don't really change. So you'll have to excuse me. Cyber diplomacy has really emerged over the last 2 decades as a vital area of international relations, and it's been driven by the strategic significance of cyberspace and the need for global norms governing state behavior online. This was first referenced actually back in the 90s, in 1996, but the term gained I'm not going to say notoriety, perhaps visibility, with early studies like the East-West Institute's 2010 report. And while it has entered policy discussions, academic research remains quite limited around the subject and tends to be quite theoretical in nature. Until recently, the United States was one of, if not arguably, the most significant actors in cyber diplomacy. It had the first ever cyber diplomat. But as I hope to show in this presentation, the Trump administration's reorganization of executive branch agencies has put the nation's diplomatic influence in cyberspace at risk. And as a consequence, it threatens the US strategic objectives, both within and outside cyberspace, and also has the potential for a major impact on cyber diplomacy norms within both the United States and outside of it. So as one scholar put it, cyber diplomacy represents the diplomatization of cyberspace. This is where traditional diplomatic tools are applied to modern challenges. And this process involves both internal and external dynamics, which might include, for example, institutional integration within foreign ministries and professional differentiation from technical legal experts. And the field has evolved what was from initially security-focused dialogues, how to make cyberspace more secure, to broader international engagement, especially around cyber-based trade. For scholars and practitioners, there is no agreed definition of cyber diplomacy, despite growing recognition in governments and faculties around the globe. This is something that has been quite discussed at length. Diplomats differ in viewing it as cybersecurity coordination or cross-sector mediation, and the field's technical complexity deters some diplomats, yet most agree its core goal is essentially conflict prevention. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or MFAs, now compete with other agencies for cyber-related representation, which has prompted internal coordination and the acquisition of technical expertise. Diplomats are expected to navigate multiple sectors like cybersecurity, trade, and climate change as the world develops. Externally, cyber diplomacy gains legitimacy through international forums like the United Nations, where experienced diplomats from leading states such as the United States and the Russian Federation assert strategic interests. Internally, cyber diplomacy's structure and scope varies by country, and it's often shaped by instance, peer influence, as well as political leadership, and that's probably going to be my major discussion today. Academics and politicians' understanding of cyber diplomacy is also clouded by the practice of e-diplomacy. This refers to the integration of digital technologies and the internet into the practice of diplomacy. It involves using online tools such as social media, video conferencing, and digital platforms to engage with foreign nations and foreign audiences, coordinate international relations, and facilitate communications between governments. And by leveraging these technologies, diplomats can enhance transparency, increase the speed of communication, but also engage with a wider global audience in real time. Social media, for example, has allowed governments to directly communicate policy positions, respond to crises, and promote cultural diplomacy. And the current president of the United States has been, I could say a champion, but certainly has been extremely influential in the use of social media. Now, the United States, why am I talking about the United States? Well, the United States is a trendsetter in cyberspace initiatives because it is one of the leading nations in technological investment and innovation. However, over the last 10 years, executive support for cyber diplomacy has ebbed and flowed in terms of direction, funding, and objectives. And arguably, this is a warning about how much it is currently ebbing rather than flowing. So in the United States, cyber diplomacy has predominantly been the purview of the State Department's Office of Cyberspace and Digital Policy, the CDP. Although CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, have also had a significant influence. CISA, for example, opened an office in London in the summer of 2022 with the intention to serve, according to its website, as a focal point for international collaboration between CISA, UK government officials, and other federal agency officials. Now, key initiatives have included the US's commitment to the multi-stakeholder model of internet governance. And until this year, the United States has been front and center of the push for international consensus on cyber norms through forums such as the United Nations Group of Governmental Experts, the UNGGE, and the United Nations Open-Ended Working Group, the OEWG. It's also part of the Quad, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which comprises the United States, Japan, India, and Australia. And this has become an important platform for regional cyber cooperation, especially in the Indo-Pacific. And since 2021, the Quad has prioritized cybersecurity and technology governance as key pillars of collaboration. But US involvement in cyber diplomacy has been supported by its role in e-diplomacy. At the outset of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, US aid played a critical role in protecting not only Ukraine's physical energy infrastructure, but also its digital systems from cyber threats. Recognizing that Ukraine's energy sector was a primary target of Russian cyber attacks, from its knowledge on past incidents such as the 2015 and 2016 grid hacks, USA prioritized cybersecurity support as a core component of its emergency assistance. And through the USAID's Energy Security Project, the ESP, which was launched in 2018, the agency partnered with Ukraine's Ministry of Energy and National Energy Providers, Ukraine's Ministry of Energy and National Energy Providers to strengthen cybersecurity resilience. This included US corporate partners such as Tetra Tech, and it also deployed expert advisory teams to help assess vulnerabilities, implement emergency response protocols, as well as reinforcing digital defenses of critical infrastructure operators. USAID helped energy companies segment networks, upgrade firewalls, and establish redundant data systems to reduce the risk of disruption. And in doing so, strengthened the international ties between the United States and Ukraine. Now, USAID also coordinated with US government cybersecurity experts and private sector partners to provide threat intelligence, incident response support, and training for Ukrainian cyber professionals. And these efforts helped blunt the impact of Russian cyber operations aimed at disabling Ukraine's energy grid and sowing chaos during the early phase of the war. Now, by integrating cybersecurity into its energy assistance, USAID contributed significantly to Ukraine's ability to maintain operational continuity amid hybrid warfare. And this support was only effective because the technical and technological know-how within USAID was coupled with the agency's unique understanding of local needs and capabilities from its position within US embassies, and it also worked alongside the State Department and the Department of Agency. So why, as this presentation argues, are we at a potentially transformative moment in US cyber diplomacy, or arguably a pivotal moment in US cyber diplomacy? I apologize for the next picture. The future of US cyber diplomacy and its inevitable impact on other nations' cyber strategies depends on the Trump administration's future financial support of such initiatives. The administration has already made significant cuts to the federal agencies as part of Elon Musk's DOGE recommendations for budgetary savings. USAID, for example, has been paralyzed by $60 billion of cuts, of which $175 million was for critical cybersecurity programs for the US's international partners, such as Ukraine. The State Department CDP has effectively been dismantled and absorbed at lower levels into other departments, which undercuts efforts to streamline cyber efforts at the State Department and will also undermine coordination in the US and abroad. And the Trump administration's 2026 budget proposal suggests that there is reduced funding for CISA by approximately $491 million. Now, these reductions in funding and resources occur amid broader efforts to streamline government spending and reorient priorities, as we've read in the press. However, the cuts to these cyber-focused entities will have profound implications, especially for international cybersecurity capabilities, the establishment of global cyber norms, and the broader practice of cyber diplomacy, not just in the United States. USAID and CISA play crucial roles in building global security resilience, particularly in developing countries that face the most severe cyber threats but lack resources to protect themselves. USAID, through its Global Development Lab, has funded programs to strengthen cybersecurity in nations across Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia. Its efforts have included enhancing digital governance, promoting the cybersecurity capacity of local governments, and also supporting cybersecurity education and awareness. The second Trump administration's cuts to USAID will effectively cancel many of these programs and limit the United States' capacity to assist foreign governments in addressing critical cyber threats. The cuts will also mean fewer opportunities for international cooperation in areas such as cybercrime, cybercrime investigation, I should say, incident response teams, and cross-border information sharing on cyber attacks. And as cyber threats, as we all know, has become increasingly transnational, the ability of the US to foster collaborative cybersecurity initiatives in vulnerable regions is more critical than ever. Reducing resources for these initiatives will mean that the US could lose ground in providing much needed technical and financial support to the global fight against cybercrime and other digital threats. Similarly, CISA, which is responsible for protecting American critical infrastructure and collaborating internationally on cybersecurity threats, faced budget reductions that will limit its ability to offer cybersecurity expertise and resources to its allies. The agency has worked with foreign governments to coordinate responses to cyber threats, build joint defense capabilities, as well as conducting vulnerability assessments. And these cuts will place these initiatives under strain and potentially lead to a less cohesive global defense posture. Now, the disestablishment of the CDP will also weaken America's position in the establishment and enforcement of international cyber norms. CDP has been a critical player in shaping global norms around the responsible use of cyberspace, through advocating for democratic principles such as freedom of expression, data protection, and privacy in digital spaces, and through its work at international organizations such as the UNGGE, as well as the G20, the Bureau has pushed for norms that have helped reduce the use of cyberspace for malicious activities. Now, without it, American cyber diplomacy efforts will also be weaker. This is particularly concerning as the global cyber ecosystem has become more contentious, with adversarial actors such as Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran seeking to set their own rules. The United States will lose leverage in these critical negotiations and reduce its ability to lead in shaping a global framework of responsible cyber conduct. Countries with more authoritarian stances on internet governance, such as Russia and China, will be able to push their own narratives, which will often clash with principles of openness and transparency espoused by the United States and its allies. Without the robust leadership of the CDP, the United States will face significant challenges in shaping global cyber norms. And this will weaken the international framework and make it harder to hold states accountable for irresponsible behavior in cyberspace. The lack of a strong, coordinated US presence in global cybersecurity governance will lead to fragmented approaches to cybercrime, cyber warfare, and digital rights protections. So cyber diplomacy is really going to be negatively affected by these funding cuts. The US has traditionally been a leader in promoting cybersecurity cooperation, advocating for an open, secure, and interoperable internet. However, the reduced resources will leave the State Department less equipped to engage diplomatically with other nations on issues such as securing supply chains, establishing cyber norms, and fostering international collaboration on cyber threat intelligence. The cuts will diminish the US's ability to project the soft power. Cyber diplomacy is an essential aspect of soft power in a digital age, and a weakened American presence in the cyber realm will mean that other countries will begin to turn to alternative powers for leadership, particularly those that sought to impose more restrictive and authoritarian approaches to cyberspace. In the long term, the cuts will damage American international strategic objectives, and this inability to offer cybersecurity assistance and leadership will make it harder to form alliances, especially in regions like the Indo-Pacific, Eastern Europe, and Africa, where cyber threats and adversaries' soft power initiatives are on the rise. The United States will lose ground in promoting its democratic ideals, including freedom of expression and individual rights in the digital space, as well as encountering threats from authoritarian regimes seeking to dominate cyberspace. So, US retrenchment from cyber diplomacy risks weakening global cyber norms and cooperation at a time of escalating transnational threats. And this shift not only empowers authoritarian models, but also leaves a leadership vacuum that could destabilize the international digital order. For scholars, these developments demand renewed academic attention to evolving power dynamics, institutional realignments, and the theoretical frameworks underpinning cyber diplomacy. As the field becomes ever more critical to global security and governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dafydd. That was absolutely fantastic, and I feel a very good overview of some of the challenges that we are currently facing at a more international level. But I guess we're lucky that we managed to keep the database of CVEs run by MITRE still going for, and albeit only for another year. Otherwise, there'll be a lot more exploits out there that we would be unaware of. Okay. Moving on from cyber conflict and cyber diplomacy, we're going to pass over now to another of our doctoral students, Samuel de Cruz, who will be covering some useful tips for how we can help to stay safe in online spaces. I shall hand over to you now, Samuel. If you've already got your screen up, amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will switch to full screen. So now everyone should see the full screen now. Thank you very much. So I'm a PhD student at the University of Portsmouth. My name is Samuel de Cruz, and I am a cyber threat intelligence analyst for the French Advanced company since 4 years now, almost 4 years. So I'm still new and discovering and learning a lot of things. And within the company, I'm working also in research and development, which requires a lot of resources and time. However, last year, during some little free times, I had an idea to create something that will be easy to use and easy to share about helping people to protecting themselves against cognitive bias, malicious exploitation by attackers. And so this is what I will show you today. This is PICAR. So it's a presentation about a simple debiasing aid for individuals working with emails. So let's start with the introduction. So this is a presentation about PICAR. This aid guides the user through 5 simple steps to avoid falling victim to a malicious attempt by an attacker to exploit cognitive bias. So PICAR is on the right side, as you can see, the blue square. So as you can see, the 5 steps: pose, identify, cultivate knowledge, alternative, and reasonable. So it was created in March 2024. And it was at first distributed to the employee of the advanced company, and then we decided also to share it to the monthly reports that we did at the same month. And so it was openly shared for everyone in France, and we also do an English version. So there is a French version and an English version today. PICAR was designed for employees who deal with emails. So for in company, you have people who spend a lot of time handling all the emails incoming to the company, and these are very vulnerable aspects of the company, because this is where there's a lot of risk of phishing and spear phishing. But we can also take into account phone calls for those who are, because you can do phishing attacks on emails, but also to phone calls. So just a little reminder, as you know, in the cyber attacks, attackers not only target technical vulnerabilities, but also they try to exploit the psychological ones. In other words, they leverage both system flows and try also, to put it simply, that try to hack the brain of the user if you can help them to get access to sensitive information. So as you can see, the picture on the right side, we have the technical warfare, where the attacker try to exploit technical vulnerabilities, such trigger buffer overflow that would help him to execute remote code, path traversal, and so on. So this is very technical engineering, but we see also more and more psychological warfare, in a way that they try more and more to hack the brain, and especially not only, but especially a cognitive bias, such as the ostrich effect, curiosity gap, authority bias, and this is, as you know, known as social engineering. And these psychological vulnerabilities are a key component of what is known as heuristics. So to put in simply, most of the time we try to act with reasons. So we will process information in a systematic way, so taking time to think. But it requires for the brain and all the cognitive effort. It requires a lot of resource. So the human mind cannot just rely on systematic way of processing. So it also relies on heuristics, which can be easily defined, to put in just as a limited word, as mental shortcuts. And this is very dangerous because when we use heuristics, we can be manipulated. So just to give you an example of what we see very often, this is extremely dangerous, is the CEO scam. In France, we call this the l'arnaque au président, which is very, very dangerous. So as you may already know, cognitive bias are unconscious and systematic thinking errors that can influence decisions and judgment. And a very dangerous cognitive bias is the authority bias, which is the tendency to obey to figure perceived as legitimate. So the authority bias is leveraged in CEO scams, where attackers impersonate high-ranking figures such as the CEO or manager or director to carry out malicious action, like in this case, very often it's the fraudulent transactions. So as you can see on the figure below, the attacker will use all kinds of technique. So after conducting reconnaissance, especially today, you can even use AI-enabled cyber attacks. So you can impersonating the CEO by using fake image, fake video, fake voice sounds, and they are doing this very well. And to conduct not only technical, as we saw previously, not only technical engineering, but also they will use all of this to manipulate the user. So we see social engineering in action. During the CEO scam, there is a phase where the attacker will try to elicit or to bring the user to perform a fraudulent transaction, and the money is going to an account that is that belongs to the attackers. So this is a very dangerous scam. And so the problem is we do have a lot of technical protection for make sure the attacker cannot conduct reconnaissance, but it's difficult on the psychological aspect of it. So the goal is with Picard is to help employee to be protected against such scam. It's difficult because human psychology is much more complex as technological technology, and so Picard alone will not work. It's better to have all sort of measure, of course. Huh? So Picard can be used to help employees to react rationally in a way and calmly, along with other protective measures. So just to be careful, Picard alone will never be enough. Try to be as much vigilant as you can, and ensure, awareness campaign and a training session will be very helpful with other tools. The goal is to help to build a shield bubble that will protect psychology of the user. So as you can see in the figure below, you have the attacker who tries to conduct a malicious attempt to hack the brain. But if the employee is correctly protected with all sorts of tools and aid and training, in France, we talk a lot about resilience, la résilience, the resilience, So training and doing, simulation, very important. So the goal of Picard is to be as simple as possible. So my idea was to put it simply in 5 steps. So the first steps will be to help the user to remind, take a pause, do not react immediately. So this is something that we see very often when I'm helping customers with the company. We see a lot of people who just click. They just click on the link within the email, the phishing emails, that they just don't think. I'm sorry to say that, but they act like machine. Even with also calls, when they get calls, they just react without thinking. So always when you have doubt, or when you see something very important emails about transaction, sensitive data that that are being asked to reveal, always take a time to take a pause, a couple of minutes, just to think about it. Is it serious? Is it why is this mail ask me to click on the link? Sorry. So take a pause. Do not react immediately. I know it's not easy if you have hundreds of mail, but at least try to not to be like a machine. Also, if you can, try to identify if you already see some suspicious, or some, in France we say des drapeaux rouges, red flag. If you see red flag, for example, that is also important. If you have training, if you have also awareness campaign, this is a good step to put this into action. Try to identify what you have learned. Cultivate knowledge. Try to, for example, if you don't have to react immediately to the mail, and you can have, let's say, 1 day to react. It's not very urgent, or you have doubt, and your manager allow you to have more time. You can take some of the time to cultivate your knowledge. Try to look for information. Maybe just look on the way the mail is shaped. Try to see if there is already known suspicion that has been highlighted on the internet, for example. So try to cultivate knowledge. Try to read about cognitive bias if you have some times. That will help you for the next time you will use PICAR. It will better for you. It will be helpful to for the second step to identify. So when you have some free times, try to read a little bit about heuristics and cognitive bias. That will be very useful. The fourth step, sorry. Alternative is probably I will say them also very important. We had a lot of good feedback with this one. It's if you have a team member or colleagues, try to ask them for help. If you are not sure, maybe they will see something. Maybe they have more experience. They will see red flags. They will see something suspicious. So it's very important to be open-minded and to be inclusive to other ideas and opinions. And of course, be reasonable. Don't act emotionally. I know it can sound obvious. However, we see that often. So how PICAR was designed? So it was done during a little bit of free times. As I said, I'm working also in research and development, and it takes a lot of more research, much more complex. But for PICAR, it was more in free time, so it has to be faster. To be created faster. So it was based on my experience with a customer. We were victim of cyber attacks, sharing of experience and knowledge between analysts, because we work a lot with forensic teams, discussion with victims, including my parents. My parents were both victims. My mother was victim of pink calls, and my father was a victim of an attacker who was impersonating his bank manager, and he asked for the password to get access to the bank account of my father. And both my parents, like machine, they didn't think. They react immediately. My mother called back the attacker. You know the principle of a ping call. My father react immediately without thinking, and they were both not acting with reason. They were both emotionally. So it's always important to try to put emotion aside and to be. I know it's not easy. It requires experience. So today, that should be to be serious. Today, the PICAR is not as scientific. It was not scientifically experimented or built. Just to be honest. So some of the feedback that we had. So the positive is that PICAR, as you saw previously, the blue square can be easily printed and shared and put on the wall and so on. So they like that employee. They like to put stuff on the walls on the office. So that's something that I like very much. It's easy to have with it in the office space. The A, the A is French. The A in PICAR alternative about highlighting the importance of asking opinions. Some employees don't have almost no knowledge about psychology or cyber psychology, on how attackers use all of these psychology techniques to manipulate. So maybe try to be open-minded. There is no shame to not know something, but it is try to ask for help. That's always helpful, and we have a good feedback of this. Some of the negative feedback that we have was that there could be sometimes confusion with identifying cultivated knowledge that has been reported by some employees. There is also a lack of explanation when to use it exactly. So there were some employees that told us it was after managing the emails. No, it was while managing emails. So that's could be interesting to explain to the not just giving PICAR, but explaining what PICAR is all about and how to use it. Improvement ideas, you can see an URL address could be added to guide the user to scientific resource about cognitive bias and so literature that could be interesting for them. There was also the idea of making double-sided so that you can have the first side with the 5 letters and more information behind it. And some have also stated that instead of writing, doing some little pictures, drawings, why not? So maybe in the future we'll do different versions. So here you have it. So you can make a print screen. I will also share the link to download this presentation and the PICAR Square. So you are free to use it. You are free to modify it if you want to create a new version, experiment, doing scientific experiment. If you want to, you can do it. You don't necessarily need to mention my name. You are free to to use it as you like and to adapt it to your context. Just example of you can put it on your desk, on the wall, to remind the user do not react immediately. Just a quick look of, I know it's not very beautiful to see. I'm an artist also, but I do much more better artwork than this. These are some of my initial drawings. They're not beautiful, but it was just to show you that instead of a linear process, there was also a time I was thinking of a circular process, and the logo also, I was working on it. So it's still on maybe the future will do more. So thank you very much. I hope it will be useful. I will share the link in the chat, and you have also my contacts. So thank you very much. And I also want to thank the University of Portsmouth and Dr. Reid. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samuel. That's really interesting. It shows also how some how innovative solutions can really help us just as little nudges on the side of our computer screen, I feel. And it would be great to see if there'd be further work in this space to see if there's how people engage with and use it, and it potentially leads to a reduction in susceptibility to clicking on phishing emails and things like that. It'd be really great to see stuff like that down the line as well. But I think one of the benefits of here is it's so simple. It's really easy to use, really easy to do.
Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. Right, moving on from the topic around cybercrime and more broadly into cybercrime education and awareness with my colleague, Dr. Annie Kirby. Are you okay for taking a speak?
Hi, thank you. I've shared. Does everything look as it should look?
Yes, yeah, it's all it's all come up there.
Perfect. So I think my presentation follows on really well from what Samuel was just talking about, actually, and there's a little bit of crossover. So I'll try not to dwell too much on elements that Samuel's already talked about. So my name's Annie Kirby, and I work for the University of Portsmouth in the Centre for Cybercrime and Economic Crime as a researcher, and also in the Cybercrime Awareness Clinic. And what I'm going to do today is just talk you through a framework that we've developed in the clinic for helping or supporting users build resilience to persuasion attempts in online spaces. So it's going to be a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. So the concept of reflective fortification, this is the name that we've coined for our model. So it's not really controversial, I think, to say that humans are a weak link in cybersecurity, and we all know that cybercriminals use social engineering, and often as part of that process of social engineering, they're trying to persuade their victims to take a certain action or not take a certain action. It's really, really essential that cybercrime awareness education supports users to build resilience to these kinds of persuasive attempts by cybercriminals. Some examples, and the kind of thing we've already heard about today, might be like a phishing email. Is trying to persuade you to click on a link. Somebody who's conducting a romance fraud is going to maybe try and persuade you to enter into a romantic relationship, and then maybe further down the line send them some money, that kind of thing. So it's absolutely crucial and important that we support users to be able to not only recognise those kinds of persuasive attempts, but also to resist them. And one of the things that I'll talk about on one of the later slides is Cialdini's 6 principles of influence. But to keep that really simple, for example, a phishing email, one of these principles of influence is liking. So a phishing email, for example, might employ a combination of liking by imitating a trusted brand or a friend or a relative. It might also then present as or an authority figure or something like that. It might also implement another of the principles, which is scarcity. That might be imposing a really short deadline, reply within 24 hours or we'll delete your account, that kind of thing. We also have the principle of reciprocity. So this is the idea that we have a social obligation to reciprocate kindnesses and favours. So for example, there's research to show that people might disclose sensitive information such as their password in exchange for a gift or a favour, that kind of thing, those kinds of cognitive shortcuts, which you've already heard a little bit about today. I've covered some of those here. Commitment and consistency is the idea that people tend to behave in a way that's consistent with their previous actions. So that enables romance fraudsters or people who are trying to groom young people into sexual relationships. It enables them to kind of rely on that tendency for a victim to continue to behave within the kind of previous actions that they've taken, and to carry on doing the same thing. So these are all kinds of cognitive shortcuts that different types of cyber criminals will exploit in online spaces. So the Cybercrime Awareness Clinic has been ongoing since about 2017, and it's a combination. We go out and we give cybercrime awareness education to local community groups in schools and colleges, to local businesses. We also conduct research and take part in project work as well. So this framework that we've developed has come about as like an experiential result of all of those different experiences and the work that we've done over that period of time. So we've learned a lot, but the things that I wanted to highlight today is just the importance, as I've already said, of building resilience to persuasive techniques, supporting online users to develop critical literacy, to develop emotional intelligence and digital citizenship, and to encourage self-reflection and personal vulnerability scanning. So I think I've already covered persuasive techniques. Critical literacy, what we're really referring to is the application of critical thinking to evaluate information encountered online, and in particular to critically evaluate online discourse. So that might be the persuasive messaging used by cyber criminals again. Emotional intelligence, we're really talking about the ability to identify and understand one's own emotions, but also other people's emotions, to regulate one's own emotions and support other people to regulate theirs in a digital environment. sort of become part of a digital community and to behave ethically and supportively online. And it's also a key part of being able to resist the emotional elements of persuasion attacks as well, because persuasion attacks often try to play on our emotions. So that's a really important thing that we want to develop in users. And this all kind of ties into digital citizenship and behaving responsibly and ethically and with empathy online. And it helps us understand how both ourselves and other people can become victims, or how we might even become a perpetrator, perhaps of online bullying or something like that. And it helps also to destigmatize victimization as users become kind of better aware of how people become victims to these kind of persuasive attacks and how we might become victims ourselves. So we want to really destigmatize victimization and make it easier for people to seek help and to report what's happened to them. So this is the little model that we've come up with, and I'm going to break it down and go through these layers in order. Again, it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Basically, we'll start with a kind of level 0. So level 0 is what we call risk-based safeguarding. And the reason it's level 0 and not level 1 is because we think we need to have some of this in cybercrime awareness education, but it doesn't do very much to build resilience to persuasive techniques. So when we talk about risk-based safeguarding, we're talking about the kind of approach where we're telling people not to do something, not to engage in a particular behavior. So online banking is too risky, you shouldn't do it at all, or you should never click on links in emails. Something we might tell young people actually is not to share sexually explicit images, you should stay off the internet. So this is kind of like a fear-based approach, and it promotes avoidant behaviours rather than empowering users to manage their own risks while embracing the positive aspects of being online. So sometimes we do need to have this. It can form a core part of cybercrime awareness education. You know, if you're giving cybercrime awareness education to a group of 15-year-olds, you probably are going to have to talk to them about the legal and ethical implications of sharing sexually explicit images, for example. But what we're saying is that this should be just one very small part of an overall approach. So it's in there, but it's kind of our level 0. It doesn't really help us build resilience in a more general sense. So, you know, we could talk to a young person about not sharing sexually explicit images, but in and of itself, that may not be an effective approach. So kind of in order to kind of really instill that, what we want is all those other elements like critical literacy and emotional intelligence and digital citizenship as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit through those other layers. So the next layer is threat focused training, and this is kind of level 1, and you can see here that we call this level 1 because this is the beginning of starting to build resilience to persuasion. The original inputs that we used to do in the cybercrime awareness clinic mainly fell into this category. So we might go to a community event and give a talk highlighting the different kinds of threats, phishing, hacking, romance fraud, etc. Give some examples of those, and then maybe some suggestions about how you can protect yourself. Don't click on links or have strong passwords. So it's all really good advice. It's information that people need to know. But what we've concluded after sort of 7 years of doing that is that this should really be the beginning of the cybercrime awareness education, and not the sole part of it. It's not on its own, it's just not enough. So we think it's really necessary, but we think it's just the first stage. But to kind of get a good grounding in this, because it's really, really important, one thing that we can use to help us deliver this is what's known as inoculation theory. So something that we do in this model is that we use proven techniques at resisting persuasion, and we've kind of developed this framework so that we can apply those techniques optimally. So inoculation theory, you may have heard of it before. It was developed in the 1960s by Maguire. and it's analogous to medical inoculation. You can introduce somebody to an idea, and then in a controlled environment, and then when they come across that idea again in the future, they're likely to be more able to defend themselves against that damaging idea. So, for example, you expose someone to an example phishing email, for example, in a controlled environment. It strengthens their ability to resist that same threat in the future. I'll skip over that because we don't really have a lot of time to do it, but we can break that down to kind of 4 easy steps that you can see on the screen there. It does have its limitations. The effects begin to wane quite quickly, and it may not be transferable between different topics. So again, we have the additional layers of the model that can kind of help us move on from this. So we've kind of inoculated people against some of these threats and some of these persuasion threats that they might come across. And then we can kind of start to move on to the next level of the model. So what we want to do next is to start building up people's critical literacy and other digital skills. So I've already talked about those. That's the critical literacy, the emotional intelligence, and the digital citizenship. I won't go over those again, as I've already mentioned them, but one way in which we can apply this in an education setting is to use something called persuasion knowledge model. So this was developed in the 1990s by Freistadt and Reid. It's also known as advertising literacy. So the concept that we're using here is that we all resist persuasion every day because we're bombarded with advertising all the time, and sometimes we might buy the thing that's advertised to us, but most of the time we don't. So we're actually really quite skilled and adept at resisting persuasion. So what the persuasion knowledge model does is to take the skills that we already have in resisting persuasion and apply them in an online space to resisting the persuasive messages of cyber criminals. It overlaps a little bit. You can see that there's overlap between the different layers of the model. It overlaps a little bit with inoculation theory, but it focuses more on the behaviours of the people exchanging the message rather than the topic. It would be, we would encourage people to think, for example, about who is giving them the message. Who is that message coming from? So if you think about advertising and why advertisers might choose certain people to kind of deliver an advert, somebody that mirrors you, someone that's similar to you, someone that you respect, that has authority, a celebrity, for example. And we can think about that in the same way when we think about how we engage with a persuasive message that may or may not be from a cyber criminal. And we're starting to now build up long-term critical thinking and emotional awareness, and we call it thinking like a criminal, thinking more about how the criminal is thinking when they're developing the message that they're going to give you. So to give an example, we can divide this into 3 stages. So this is our general persuasion knowledge. This is what we already know about resisting persuasion. We do it all the time. We might choose this point to introduce Cialdini's principles, reflect on our own experiences of either resisting cybercrime persuasion attacks or advertising or political campaigning or whatever kind of message it is that we've had experience of resisting. It would also be a good point to think and introduce some specific phishing messages and have a look and start to break them down and understand a little bit more about how they're constructed. And that also overlaps with inoculation. So with inoculation, for example, you might tell somebody, you can warn somebody that even though it's a really good idea not to click on phishing messages, they're going to encounter people online that are going to try and persuade them to do just that, to click on that link. And this is exactly how they're going to do it, and give them example. And this is how you're going to defend. This is how you're going to defend yourself. So that would be inoculation. And then in a persuasion knowledge module, we just take that a little bit further to think also about the communicator, the agent of the model, the agent of the message, and how will this influence how you respond to the message, and how will it influence you if the user turns out not to be who you thought they were, or all kinds of things like that. So and Samuel's already discussed authority bias, for example, and that would be an example of thinking about the agent of the message and how that might influence the way in which you respond to that communication and that persuasion attempt. So the next stage of the model is personal vulnerability scanning, and this is the part that's new. So risk-based and threat-focused and critical literacy and digital skills, we've incorporated already proven frameworks for resisting persuasion and tried to structure them in a way that's really useful to use in a cybercrime awareness setting. When it comes to personal vulnerability scanning, this is something a bit new, and what we're thinking about here is all of these models seem to assume that our vulnerabilities to persuasive messages are quite static and that they're the same all the time, but actually we're human beings and our personal vulnerabilities to persuasion attempts fluctuate very much in all of us. So when we talk about personal vulnerability scanning, we're not talking about victim blaming, but really about the process of understanding our own vulnerabilities and how they might change from day to day, and what we can do about that and how we can protect ourselves from those changing vulnerabilities. So a really good example that happened just recently, Troy Hunt, you may be familiar with the name. He's a cyber awareness, famous cyber awareness speaker. He runs the website Have I Been Pawned, which lets people search their emails to see if they've been subject to data breaches. He recently clicked on a link in an email that he thought was from his MailChimp provider telling him that his account had been suspended because he'd been reported for spam. But it was a phishing attack. And he clicked on it, and within seconds, all the details of his mailing list had been stolen. And that's, he is, he fights cybercrime for a living. That's what he does. But on that particular day, he was vulnerable, he was busy, he was tired, he'd just got off a flight. He was sending out a newsletter the following day, so it was really important to him that his MailChimp list wasn't suspended. So he had that specific vulnerability on that day. And other reasons why we might be more or less vulnerable could be illness, tiredness, being bereaved, just being busy, having an interest in a particular topic. We might be waiting for a parcel. So if we get an email telling us we need to click on the link to be able to pay the extra fee for our parcel or something like that, we're more vulnerable. So our vulnerabilities change. One thing that Samuel's already talked about is Kahneman and this idea of exploiting fast thinking or instinctual thinking, and that we need to kind of take a breath and slow down and pause. So that's something we would encourage. I won't kind of belabor that point because I think Samuel's already covered it really, really well. So finally, so we're starting to think like a victim, but it's not about victim blaming. It's about understanding how any one of us, no matter how knowledgeable or confident we are in being online, can become a victim. So finally, what we do is to kind of encompass that whole model into an experiential learning cycle. So this is Gibbs's reflective cycle. It allows us to learn from experience by evaluating what's happened, considering how we might take something might reach a different outcome if we did it differently. So we're thinking about what happened. What we want is for people to take this away from their cybercrime awareness education training and to use it between trainings, because we already know that what we learn in training sessions fades within weeks or months. And if we have training at work, it's probably only once a year or once every 6 months. So what we want is for people to continue to reinforce their training and to take themselves around this experiential cycle. What happened? What did you feel before, during, and after? In what ways were you vulnerable to persuasion on this particular day that might have been different on another day? How did you evaluate the persuasive message? What could you have done differently? all those kinds of things, making an action plan for future use. So this is our model. I'm sorry it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour and I've had to kind of whiz through it. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions, and my details are there. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Annie. That's been absolutely brilliant for showing the work that's still being done by the cybercrime clinic and the next steps for taking it further forward. I guess that brings us to the end of all of our speakers today, and I guess there's been some nice parallels across everybody's thing, talking about how we can use new technologies to explore cybercrimes, but also how to enhance thinking in security environments. We've considered the challenges posed and how we are engaging with our adversaries in cyberspace in terms of cyber conflict. At the same time, my colleague Dafydd has been exploring US cyber diplomacy and how the events over the last few months have potentially going to be leading to radical changes within this space, and how at a global level cyber is negotiated, through to presentations from Samuel and from Annie, which taken a moment to step back and consider ways in which we can help prevent cyber attacks at a more individual level, through to how we may tailor and develop cyber security awareness and education training packages. So I think some part of the key here, takeaway message across all of these, is that cyber is massive, really. I mean, we need to incorporate a whole host of different approaches to really understand this area, and it's going to call for greater interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approaches to working on these very difficult questions, these very difficult areas to explore. And we're really going to have to, all of us, work together and potentially have a really think about how some of these challenges are addressed at the societal level as well. I'm also wondering if we've had any sort of overall questions come in at all from the outside audience that I may wish to assign to speakers to answer. Have we had any questions come in at all, Melissa? Or is there any thoughts or pointers? I'm aware it's very early in the morning in Canada now at this point. So we're just holding on a second for any questions which have come in. Yeah, no, it's been great to take part in SECREV for another year. I'm definitely looking forward to the next one. Already, it's giving you some further ideas for topics for next year as well. Again, I wish to thank our speakers today, whilst we've had talks from a number of our PhD students, from Martin, from Jo, from Alice and Samuel, through to some of my colleagues, Annie and Dafydd as well. So thank you all very much for agreeing to present this year. Ooh, Samuel, first up for you, I'm afraid. I have a question come through, which is, what are the major challenges involved in convincing management to adopt PICAR?
Talk about the consequences. When if the company is victim of a CEO scam, I think that is something that happens very often in human psychology. If I understand the question correctly, is that sometimes what we see often, we all have seen that, is that when people become victim, then they realize how important it is to prepare ourselves. So that's not only on the individual aspect, but also for a whole company to understand that there are risks. The consequences are not beautiful to watch, and to be honest, it's always important to talk about it and to talk about it openly with manager and director, and to try to make them realize that the more you are prepared, the more you have tool to protect yourself, the better it is. And sometimes we see customers that they lost a lot, and the company will not survive, and that's hardcore. And so sharing experience from people who have living it, it's also important to make them realize. I don't know if I answered the questions exactly.
Oh, it's okay. So, yeah, we've got 4 minutes left. Is that enough time for any other questions, Melissa? Or okay. Right. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not too sure we've got enough time left for answering any other further questions. But of course, you're more than welcome to reach out to myself at Iain.reid@port.ac.uk if you do have any questions about any of the talks from any of my colleagues today, and I will be able to direct you through to them as well if you hadn't had a chance to grab anybody's email addresses from their slides. Okay. But yeah, no, it's been really fun to be involved in this yet again. Okay. I think we've still got a couple of minutes left. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all very much for listening today. As I say, we've been speakers from the University of Portsmouth today, from our cybercrime and cybersecurity research group, and from colleagues across the broader university as well. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to our presenters today. Thank you.